America is now projecting power onto Iran's very doorstep. The carrier battle group, led by the USS Abraham Lincoln and 3 destroyers, has now reached the northern Arabian Sea and is within striking distance of Tehran. What President Trump decides to do with this display of force tonight remains unclear. But he teased the arrival of the warships to his supporters in Iowa last night.
And by the way, there's another beautiful Armada floating beautifully toward Iran right now. So we'll see.
He returned to the White House with Iran on his mind, posting on his social media platform that the US military is ready, willing, and able to rapidly fulfill its mission with speed and violence if necessary. Hopefully Iran will quickly come to the table and negotiate a fair and equitable deal. He added ominously, "There was Operation Midnight Hammer, a major destruction of Iran. The next attack will be far worse. Don't make that happen again." Operation Midnight Hammer was the US airstrike in June by B-2 stealth bombers that inflicted severe damage on Iran's nuclear facilities. On Capitol Hill today, the US Secretary of State sought to explain why a preemptive strike on Iran might be justified.
The president always reserves the preemptive defensive option. In essence, if we have indications that, in fact, they're going to attack our troops in the region, to defend our personnel in the region. We also have security agreements, the Defense of Israel Plan and others, that require us to have a forced posture in the region to defend against that.
But there are senators here with no appetite for a war on Iran. Indeed, some are openly critical of the justification for the attack on Venezuela.
So I would ask you, if a foreign country bombed our air defense missiles, captured and removed our president, and blockaded our country, would that be considered an act of war? Of course it would be an act of war.
In Iran, there is even greater complexity given the wave of major protests that recently swept the country. The ruthless response by Iranian security forces is believed to have killed several thousand activists. And on the streets of Tehran, some are still learning of that death toll.
There were a lot of people out there in the streets when I had to leave home. I don't know what to say, but the situation was very bad. Now that the internet connection is restored, we only now know that so many were killed.
Meanwhile, Iran's leaders are warning the US not to miscalculate. The defense minister posting that a US attack will be considered the start of war and its response will be immediate, all out and unprecedented, targeting heart of Tel Aviv and all those supporting the aggressor. The question is whether Trump, besieged at home over his immigration crackdown, but emboldened by the success of the raid on Venezuela, now decides to risk everything by launching an attack on Iran's top leadership.
And Robert joins us now. Robert, you kind of posed the question at the end there. He can do it. Will he?
I think, Tom, it's almost impossible to answer tonight, not least because I think it's likely the president himself, even though he's got the assets in place now, hasn't yet made that decision. As we've alluded to, I mean, look, the template, the guide is the Venezuela operation. President Trump kept a carrier battle group in the Caribbean for months, and in the end, that was not a bluff. There was that operation by US Special Forces on January the 3rd that went into the country and seized President Maduro. On the one hand, it's widely viewed that that operation made President Trump more comfortable with the use of military force. But on the other hand, Tom, in retrospect, it emerged that wasn't an attempt, a regime change, rather had a very focused aim and was more about intimidation and a display of military prowess. And I think it's understood even in the Trump White House that, look, Iran is vastly more complicated. The consequences of an attack on Tehran are wildly unpredictable. So I think, on balance, it seems likely that all of this rhetoric and these social media posts are more like a kind of 21st century version of gunboat diplomacy, trying to exact concessions rather than foreshadowing an actual military attack.
OK, Robert, thank you very much indeed. Well, Emma is here to talk about this. If Robert is right, what does Trump really want out of this? I mean, the last attacks were supposed to take out the nuclear capacity, and now, from the way he's talking, it doesn't seem like it did. Is that what he really wants? Does he want something else? How will he go about it?
Well, let's look at what he's saying. He's saying that he wants Iran to give up its nuclear program. He's saying that he wants them to get rid of their ballistic missiles, to reduce the amount of them and the distance that they can travel, and also stop supplying the proxies, so Hezbollah, Hamas, and the Houthis. What he's not saying in any of those comments is what he originally supposedly started out to do, which was help the protesters. There's been no mention of them in those discussions. And it's worth noting that when he talks about wanting some kind of change to the nuclear situation, well, Iran was in a nuclear deal until President Trump threw that away in 2018. So it is very difficult to know exactly which way he wants to go with this. Of course, there is the continual discussion that he wants to potentially take out the Ayatollah, potentially take out the leadership in Iran. And that sense of being emboldened by Venezuela is very clear. And I was struck by the fact that he used the same words today when talking about Iran as he did after Venezuela, which was speed and violence. Now, I hope that for the safety of the region and the global community, there are calmer heads inside Washington saying to him, Venezuela is not the same as Iran. Iran will see any attack as an existential threat and will respond in kind. And that will be incredibly damaging for the region and global security.